Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
It's done.
Connor McDavid! It's not real!
The goal of the year,
Panarin!
part of the past. The celebrations, forgotten. The history,
Vegas Golden Knights!
history. We're back to a blank slate. Clean ice. All that matters now is what happens next. The Stanley Cup playoffs.
Eastern Conference Final begins Wednesday.
Hey, what's up, Blazer fans? Welcome to the Blazers Edge podcast. I am Tara Bowen-Biggs, joined as always by Blazers outsider Danny Meringue.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Danny. But wait, there's more. We are not alone today. We are so lucky to be joined by Casey Holdahl today of the Portland Trail Blazers beat writer. Casey, welcome to, should I say welcome back? Welcome home, Casey.
Yeah, no, I thank you guys so much for having me. You should not feel lucky at all. You're more than deserving, and you guys do great work, so I'm happy to join. And you know what? Though I did create the thing, Dave really took it and ran. So no, it's not so much a welcome back. It's just a familiarity, perhaps. Let's put it at that.
I kind of feel like it, when you have like a big brother who goes off and, makes his way in the world and does a really great job, and you talk about him all the time. And it's just so exciting when he's able to make it home for the holidays and you're able to see him and ask him like, how is it really going, and hear all the great stories. That's kind of how I feel like it.
Oh, that is far too kind. Thank you so much. What a nice compliment.
That's Team Mom for you.
I can't stop it. It just doesn't shut down. Well, I would love to hear from you, Casey. Just a little bit about your journey from Blazers Edge to working for the Trailblazers, and how has that evolution gone for you and the different things you've learned along the way?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as probably a lot of you are aware, I started writing I'm obviously in my own free time after I got out of college. Started a blogspot blog that might even still exist somewhere out there, though I think blogspot is defunct. So maybe it disappeared. Who knows? But anyways, I was doing that for a while, and then this company called SB Nation was forming up. I believe it was the folks at Daily Kos had decided that they were going to do a sports site or something along those lines. It was kind of built on the same platform, and they went out and tried to find some people that were already writing about specific teams, and this was back in 2002 or 3. So you're kind of still when things were in their infancy in terms of blogging and writing on the web, and just kind of the democratization of the web itself. So I was approached about, starting a blog, and they're like, hey, perhaps you might even get a little money out of it. And I was like, hey, great. I do it for free anyways. So whatever. So I signed on, and that blog became Blazers Edge. I did that for about a year and a half, I think, while I was also working at the Statesman Journal, working on their sports desk at night. And while I was working days, my full-time job was working at Lynn Benton Community College, doing media services. So distance education, installing projectors, installing AV equipment, helping professors utilize technology in their classes, so on and so forth.
I have a quick question. Do you remember what your original blog was called?
I think it was just called Blazers Basketball. It was whatever the available URL on the Blogspot platform was.
And that was a really long time ago. Like, how did you explain to people what you were they like, a blog? What's that? I mean, it was a long time ago.
Well, for the most part, I didn't tell people, like I just wrote it. And to your point, I still have to explain to my father, I think pretty much understands what I do. My mom, I think, is still pretty much kind of in the dark about what exactly it is that I do and how exactly I get paid for doing what I do. So to answer your question, it's still, even now, it requires some some explanation. But
hey man, it's me being on a TV for my friends and family to figure it out. So
no, exactly, that helps.
Understand it.
Absolutely. But my thing, like, I was always inspired by this blog. It was called Supersonic Soul. And it was like 3 guys who wrote it, who basically just cracked jokes about the team. And I always thought it had a nice way about it. And that's kind of what I tried to kind of, the lane I kind of tried to pick, along with, just the general fan disposition. And, as you guys know, being a Blazer fan is a nonstop roller coaster. So there's always a lot of content there.
Well, and then what was it like going from, having complete and total control over writing whatever the heck you felt like and, cracking bad jokes or whatever, to like going and having to, I don't know if more professional is like the way you would say it, but did you have to make that kind of a transition? And do you remember what that was like?
Well, so from Blazers Edge, I ended up taking a job with the Oregonian, or OregonLive.com. And this was back when OregonLive and the Oregonian were completely separate. I mean, there was some, like, we were in a completely different office. The people who worked at the Oregonian hated us. We got paid like a quarter of what they got paid. So I took that job doing high school sports coverage. So it was really there in between the Statesman Journal and working at Oregon Live, and also having a degree in journalism from the University of Oregon, I already had a background in journalism. So it wasn't like, I was writing some pretty wild and probably in some respects disrespectful stuff back in my Blazers Edge days, but I felt like it at least had somewhat of a veneer of professionalism to it. So when I did transition more into it being a job, as it was at Oregon Live, a lot of initially that was for high school sports. So, it's, you're not going to crack jokes about high school kids, and, you basically got to cover it straight up because, their parents are interested in reading about the games. And, again, like when you're covering that group, it's, some of the snark and, maybe just some of the pestering and the teasing and the needling, you really wouldn't do. So in that regard, it didn't really afford that opportunity anyways. So that was pretty easy. And when I did
list of the Oregon Live forums, you just didn't want to tease it.
Well, I did spend some time in those forums, and actually I believe the death of the forums actually came down to high school sports. A lot because I could not explain to you guys how back then. This is before Twitter.
I remember how bad those were.
Well, and they were bad. And what I'm saying, though, is that while the forums themselves were bad, like the complaints we would get from the high schools about those forums was nonstop. So what I'm getting at to where now, like, if a bunch of high schoolers want to get together and talk trash about each other, they go on Twitter or on Snapchat or on Instagram, and they do it there. But back then, they did it on the forums, and we would have the school administrators, the coaches, the teachers calling and complaining and saying, how can you provide this forum for these people? They're jerks. They're saying all these awful things. We're not going to let you onto our campus. We're not going to let you cover our events. We're not going to cooperate with you at all. And to go from that to where it's like now it's there is no moderation, like it's everything is out there and there's no stopping it. Like it always makes me kind of smile when I think back on those times, think like, people were fighting against a tidal wave, with like an oar, and like they had no chance whatsoever. They had no idea what was coming, and the complaints that they had then wouldn't even register now in terms of kind of the things that happen online.
The severity of it.
Yeah, exactly. The severity and just kind of it's a positive tool obviously as well, but just the some of the negativity on it would never be something. The things that make social now would be things that we would have well moderated out of the message boards way back in the Oregon Live days. But yeah, that especially the Blazers message board on Oregon Live is. I think that it's a pretty good encapsulation of what it's like to be a Blazer fan, and I think it definitely served a purpose. And the Rip City 2 sports forum still exists now on our platform, actually, and does pretty well. And I don't get in there as often as I would like to, actually. But, there's some value to that still.
Now, when did you transition from the Oregonian to the Trailblazers?
That was 2007, I believe. If memory serves, my first day with the Blazers was, I think like December 12th, 2007. So it was right after it was after the Oden draft.
Okay.
And at this point in time, this is when they really were like, all right, we need to kind of ramp up what we're doing digitally, because, we're the expectation and the hope is that we got this group of players, and Brandon Roy, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Greg Oden, and to a lesser extent, a guy Nicholas Batum. Like, we're going to be good. We're going to need to really kind of throw a lot of content here. And as you guys are probably aware, and got talked about a lot after he passed, Paul Allen was always kind of at the forefront of sports information on the web, and using the web as a way to disseminate information particularly in terms of sports, him creating basically the ESPN website. So there was always an interest there from the organization to be like, hey, we need to be telling our story, and we need to be out in front of some of these technological advances that we think are going to really kind of explode as the years go on. So obviously after the Oden draft, it just kind of makes sense to try to bring in some more people. At this point in time, Jim Taylor, who is now in charge of our basketball public relations, he was kind of doing a lot of the stuff that I do now to a lesser extent, but his title was Blazers evangelist. And he would write some stories. And this was back when the team was really kind of in the doldrums of the Jail Blazer era, when, no one cared about the team. People weren't covering the team. Whatever coverage they got was negative, and, for a good reason. And so when Jim transitioned back into more of a PR role, they were like, well, we need to bring in someone else to kind of fill that void. And, they approached me about doing it, and I kicked the tires on it for a little bit, decided that, I really enjoyed working at OregonLive. I really like the people there. A lot of the people who are still there are people I worked with: Ben Sherman, Tim Brown, Sean Mager, all great dudes. But the opportunity to work for a team and to really work with the athletes on a one-to-one basis, and to travel and to see other NBA cities and other arenas, and just to kind of get immersed in what it's actually like to work for and to travel with an NBA team was kind of too much to pass up. So I took it, and been there ever since.
And this is like the time that you guys, it kind of spun up the I'm a TrailblazersFan.com and stuff like that too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. As you mentioned, yeah, the I'm a TrailblazersFan.com was, we went far enough to think like, hey, let's create our own social network that we can have for Blazer fans to interact on, which, it was a pretty good idea. I think too big of an undertaking for a franchise, I think. And as time went on, I think we found out that, as I'm sure the people at Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and wherever else can attest to, those social networks, they seem like such a simple idea. It's like Twitter seems like a real simple idea, like it's like, hey, you write a few characters in a post, and it's kind of like a test message that everyone gets. But the back end of that stuff, and then the administration of that kind of stuff really starts to get difficult as it expands. It's hard to scale, as I think, we're seeing right now with some of the issues that the multinational social media companies are having in terms of data and privacy and all those things. So I think at a certain point, we're like, what, this was a good idea. We're not really up to the task, so we gotta cut bait on it. But that did kind of get us in place for being ready for what was coming in terms of social. And as I mentioned, we've always been a forward-facing team. Dan Harbison, who's not with the team anymore, works at Jordan Brand now, was really out in front of that stuff in terms of and just seeing and recognizing the importance of social, particularly Twitter, and to a lesser extent Facebook, was going to be going forward. And so, again, working for Paul Allen, there's always that desire and that want to kind of keep pushing those things and keep exploring those spaces, which, has always made the Blazers a great team to work for in terms of digital, because there's always been that drive to innovate and to do different things, because it came from the top. If you have ownership that doesn't really care about that stuff, it's kind of hard to make that pitch in those meetings to get budget for those resources and for those FTEs and for the, some of the technological pieces that may or may not ever produce anything. It's some of it you gotta kind of take a chance on it. And when you work for an organization, like I have with, obviously Paul Allen not being around anymore, but with that being so important to him, it made the Blazers a really fun place to work, because we could try different things, we could make mistakes, and we still do that now under Dwayne Hankins. Dwayne is a phenomenal boss to work for, because he basically, a lot of the stuff that we've done throughout the years that people have really enjoyed on social, we've gotten pushback on some of it from the league, some of it from people within the organization. but having a manager and a VP that's willing to be like, yeah, people are going to complain about some of this stuff, but it's also going to benefit us in the long run. Like that's hard to come by. And so I feel like I've been real lucky in my career to work for people that are really willing to kind of to take some chances and to put themselves out there and to kind of do for their employees and to protect their employees as well. Because I think we've seen throughout the years in the NBA, and it doesn't happen a lot, but every now and then. And the situation I'm thinking of is a few years back with the Rockets and the Mavericks in that series when they had the tweet with the gun pointing at a horse or something like that.
Maybe ever.
Yeah, it's like, someone lost their job over that, and it's like, really? Like, is that really worth it? Like, maybe it was stupid or maybe it didn't work, but one, it got a whole lot of people talking, and two, like, when you don't have strong management, those kind of things basically get people fired. And then in those situations, the next time you're in that decision point to be like, are we going to kind of try to push this a little bit or should we come back? The thing that's in everyone's mind is like, well, that guy got fired last time, so I don't want to put my job on the line to do this. So yeah. I guess basically, long story short, what I'm getting to is that from an organizational perspective, the Blazers have always been really serious about, being in that space digitally. And, for someone who's worked for them for years and years and years now, it's been a bonus.
I mean, that shows through the people you guys have had there too, alongside you, Chris, Cody, now Amara. I mean, the stuff that you guys have constantly put out. And for anybody not well versed in the Twitter side of things, I know there's a lot of people that don't really interact via Twitter, but still follow here or Facebook or other medias. I mean, the one that always comes back for me is the whole, obviously, Chandler Parsons CJ thing.
Yeah.
And the league didn't exactly like that, right?
No, they did not. And that I was actually thinking about that the other day. So we were talking about on the Rip City Report about I was making the case that the NBA needs to get back to letting guys fight from time to time, because I felt like some of the kind of some of the snipping and the sniping and kind of some of the tough guy act that we see from guys now, like you might be able to get that out of the game a little bit if every now and then, if a guy got out of the line, you were able to pop him in the face. And I just lost where I was going with that. Actually,
I don't know, but you know what? Speaking of fighting, if I could have, I would have jumped down onto the court and punched Greyson Allen on Wednesday night for clocking Alfred.
By the way, too, I didn't want to put this out there because I don't want to put anyone on blast, but I feel like podcasts are a good place to do this. There were multiple people on press row that were like, "That's not a flagrant foul," and I was like, "Are you kidding?" He elbowed the guy in the face. Like he led with his elbows, and they're like, well, what's he supposed to do? He's just defending himself. I was like, what do you, I don't understand this argument that elbowing a guy in the face is.
Casey, give me their names. I will address each one of these people individually.
I'm not going that far, but all I'm saying is that it was, there's a pretty, I think some people are a little tired of seeing some guys on the team maybe flop around a bit and maybe not believe it so much when they're getting hit in the face, that they're being genuine about the pain that they're experiencing. So I think there's a little bit of that involved too. But it's one of those things where I was like, I know the guys kind of ham it up a little bit, and they're definitely putting on a bit of an act from time to time to get the benefit of the doubt, but. Al-Farouq just got elbowed in the face by Greyson Allen, a guy whose reputation more than precedes him. So let's not try to figure out a way that this wasn't a flagrant foul. Let's just maybe accept it for what it is.
I had the perfect angle on that one, and I am probably outside of his own family the biggest Al-Farouq Aminu fan there is, and I was about ready. Like the people behind me were like, "Whoa, she's a little out of control." And I'm not into violence at all, but if there was any a time that I was thinking about it, that would have been that. Well, anyway, let's turn to that game on Wednesday night, because I could ask you questions about the Blazers forever and ever, but for a really quiet time in the Blazers schedule, there's still lots to talk about. So let's talk briefly about that game on Wednesday night. Meyers Leonard got the start. The Blazers got a win, like a big time win over Utah. What are your guys' thoughts on what we learned from that game?
Well, I think for me, one, I was really happy to see Meyers go out and have a great game. We were talking about today. I think that might have been, at least in terms of his production and the situation, that might have been one of Meyers' best games of his career, period. I think it instantly qualifies as one of the best, if not the best this season. But, for Meyers to come in as a starter against a very good Utah Jazz team with Rudy Gobert, arguably one of, if not, well, he's not the best center in the league, but definitely right up there. And a guy who has given the Blazers fits from time to time, for Meyers to come into that game, play as well as he did, and be able to force Gobert to kind of get away from the rim by using his shooting. I think that game for me was like, that is what the team had in mind when they signed Meyers. If he could play that well every single game, and I'm not saying that necessarily that's even the expectation, but it's like you understand what the team was getting at when they signed that deal with Meyers, to where if he was able to start, even 60 games and play anywhere close to the way he played versus the Jazz, like that would have changed a whole lot of the way that people view Meyers and the way that people view this team. So for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways. And two, just, to see the Blazers come out again and put on a good performance against a good team. I feel like that's been kind of a knock on them, and rightfully so this season, is that while they have a good overall record, their record against teams in the West and the record against good teams in the West is not what you would like to see it. To go out and have a really dominant performance against a very good team in the Utah Jazz that haven't lost to anyone in the last 3 weeks except for the Blazers, I think kind of speaks to their growth. And at least for me personally, it gives me a little more faith in this team than I think I probably had, say, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of feeling the same way. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with me just constantly bemoaning everything, Casey. So
I'm right there with you. So
I'm a pessimist, and honestly, I look at that game. Everything you touched on is that I think that was arguably their best win of the season. Utah playing probably their best basketball coming into that game, 9-1 in their last 10 games. Donovan Mitchell had been on an absolute tear. I think 30 points, 6, 7 assists, 5 rebounds a game. And then you've got Gobert, who, obviously with the news today of not making the All-Star team.
It was a rough week for Rudy Gobert.
Yeah. But you look at what it meant, how Utah had really handled Portland in the past. Obviously the Blazers had gotten one win before that. Everything kind of stacked up against. And then all of a sudden you find out Nurk's got knee trouble. And you're like, wait, where'd this come from? And you're kind of on shaky ground because you're wondering how you're going to see Portland handle Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert going down the barrel over and over again. And even though Rudy goes 7 of 9 and Mitchell goes 8 of 16, I thought the two guys who I think in the past have carried a lot of stick for defensive shortcomings, and Dame and Meyers had some of their best pick and roll coverage I've ever seen from them. Like you get elite guys like Mitchell and Gobert at off that pick and roll, who, even though they were hitting shots, both those guys were doing everything they needed to do. The communication was there, and it felt like they'd been doing it forever. Like that was the starting lineup that we'd seen between like Dame and Nurk. And for Meyers to step up in that manner and contribute the way he did defensively was, I think, the thing to me that came more to the front, because I think offensively, at least for me, I know what Meyers can do. Meyers can shoot the rock. Hands down, anybody who still wants to get out there on Twitter, on Facebook, or any forum, or Reddit, and talk about how Meyers is a bum and can't do this it's to the point of just ridiculous. And it's like, the dude can shoot. Get him a lob. Let's see what he can do defensively. That's the only time I ever want to see where Meyers measures up. And those two guys on the defensive side were phenomenal for me. Also, Zach Collins, as much stick as I gave him, got absolutely robbed of one of the best I've ever seen in my life. And Bruce captured probably one of the nastiest pictures I have ever seen. I think it was Zach's PR rep replied to a tweet I said that Zach needed to have this framed. She's like, absolutely, Bruce, where can I get a copy of this? That was, you tick all the boxes in that game. Realistically, everybody contributed. The offense was there. The defense was there. They had a clean game turnover wise. If you really have to hunt for something that's a negative, I guess you can maybe say Seth not being quite aware of that rebound.
I don't mind that so much either. Because they were already like, it was already starting to get a bit ragged, you know. And if a rebound comes to you, it's like the idea like I'm going to put my hands up and not grab it, like that's not the way to go. So I appreciate that Damian didn't get upset about that, and I appreciate that. I mean, according to Damian after the game, he told Terry to take him out because he already felt like things were kind of going a little sideways.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing too, I just wanted to mention this because I didn't get to report it out. And it's kind of a mystery, but since we're talking about the Jazz, so in those first two Jazz games, Blazers got beat pretty soundly. Yeah. The third one was in Utah a couple weeks back, and Dwight James, after shoot around in Utah, asked Terry, he was like, "Hey, you know, are you guys going to make any changes after, you know, basically they really took it to you two times?" And Terry's like, "Yeah, we're making a defensive tweak. It's a minor one, but we're going to see how it goes." And then they go out and they win that next game versus the Jazz. And then, Danny, to your point, they go out and have a really nice defensive game against the Jazz at home. And none of us who were there remembered to ask Terry what that tweak was. So they did change something defensively from the first two games versus Utah, from the second two games in Utah, but we don't know what it is. So, and there's a pretty good chance that Terry wouldn't tell us anyways. But for those who wonder, like, are they making tweaks? Are they making changes? Are they really paying attention to what's happening in one game and then applying it to the next? Yes, they are. And I don't know necessarily that you can chalk up what they did in their last two games versus Utah to whatever that defensive tweak was, but it might have played at least a small role in it.
Whatever it was, it made Quinn Snyder age 10 years in the span of 4 years.
I need to go back and watch it, but I wonder if it was where Nurkic was playing up high, like he was playing up high in a couple. I think he was either playing up high in the first couple of games and then moved down low, or he was playing down low and moved up high. I don't know. That's my guess. That's what I would go back and look at first.
Yeah, I would say it probably had something to do with Nurkic. That would also be my guess. But again, I'd really have to go back and kind of do some comparisons. But I might just ask him the next time we have practice and see if he'll fess up to it.
I would say my favorite part about the Utah game was I thought Stotts was absolutely masterful in his late decision about, or I don't know who made that decision, but whoever decided to delay the reveal that Nurkic wasn't going to be playing for a super long time. I thought that was the key to the whole game, because I admire Rudy Gobert a lot. I love how he plays, but I remember a couple of years ago reading an article about him and thinking, you know, wow, this guy is really good, but he's also like really high maintenance and he's worth it. But everybody around him, like, he likes to know what's happening. He likes to know what's going on. He's just somebody who through that, reading that article, he struck me as a guy who doesn't like surprises. And so whoever waited until the very last second to scratch Nurkic and put in Meyers, I was so excited to like see the look on Rudy Gobert's face when he stepped out there and he looked up, and instead of Yusuf Nurkic, it was Meyers Leonard that he had to go against. Because I really think that threw him off. I mean, he still played well, but he was like, I got to go out to the 3-point line now. Like, it just took him all out of the game, and I think that just had a cascading effect. And I think credit should go to whoever delayed that reveal as long as possible.
A couple things there. I think you're right on. I mean, because the Jazz had, I think, 3 days off before that game. So if they know that Nurkic isn't playing even a day in advance, that probably changes some of their preparation and some of their scouts. So I think you're onto something there. The second thing I would say is that in general, the Blazers play all injuries incredibly close to the vest. They don't give us any information about anything. So when something happens and they're like, and people are like, this Nurkic knee injury just kind of came out of nowhere. It's like, well, probably not, because the thing is, like, they just don't tell us anything until they absolutely have to. And while I know that pisses off the gamblers, and particularly the daily fantasy folks, and, I've tried throughout the years to help out as much as I can, but, they tend to get pretty upset about those things. And I understand it. But to your point, like, there is a slight competitive advantage in basically not letting the opponent know who's going to be out there until the last possible second. Now, is it going to win you a game? Probably not. But if you think about it, like, what is the advantage for you from a competitive perspective in letting your opponent know who is and isn't going to be playing? There is no advantage, and in some respects, you could say that it's a disadvantage. At the very least, there is no disadvantage in not letting your opponent know who's going to be out there until the last minute. So while I know that if you're trying to lay a bet or if you're trying to set your fantasy lineup, I realize that that that's not going to be great for you. But if it's going to help the Trailblazers at all, and you're a fan of the team, I'd probably just grin and bear it on that one.
I am all for that strategy. I got one more question about that game on Wednesday, and then I think it'll segue into the next topic. Did you guys catch the in-arena tribute to Nik Stauskas video?
Yes, I did.
Was up with that?
Well, no. So what those are that's a sponsored element, and I believe is sponsored by Gatorade. And so basically the way it works, it's not a tribute so much as it's just kind of like a highlight package for that player. And I did even know, and I was talking to Amara, I was like, yeah, probably not great timing on that Stauskas package considering he's not really playing right now. But no, those are basically scheduled out in advance. And so, it was whatever night it was. It's like that was the Nik Stauskas Gatorade performance jumbo screen element game. So yeah, and again, like they are pretty typically decent videos. But having it for a guy who's not really in the rotation at the time, kind of a little bit of a bummer there. But
I got told they're good. Stauskas. I was like, right on, Nick. And I was like, wait a minute, is his birthday? And then I was like, of course I went to my conspiracy theory, which was like, if there's scouts from other teams in here seeing the Nik Stauskas video, they'll be like, we want Nik Stauskas on our team, and that'll start the whole trade rumors. So it probably wasn't that, but it's that time of year, right? And can you guys tell me with a straight face that you don't go to conspiracy theories every time you hear someone's injured?
Having worked for the team for as long as I have, like I really don't, because I know for the most part, one, trades are generally the least likely option. Mm-hmm. And two, like, I hope this doesn't make the team look bad or anything, but to your point, like we don't have that level of coordination, like the idea that we're planning these things in advance that far. And like with that kind of like intelligence, I wish I could say that we operated like that, but we just don't. Like, so some of the things that people put together because they're like, well, this makes sense. So this kind of must be where the direction they're going. Like a lot of times I'm like, yeah, if we really had our ducks in a row, maybe we would do something like that. But like we do not have that much time, and particularly that level of coordination between the business side and the basketball side to really pull off stuff like that. And again, and so to your question as well, in terms of injuries, I know that there are a lot of people that are like, whoa, boy, is Nurkic really injured? Are they holding him out because it's a trade? Like those are the kind of things where like I mentioned that to one of our PR guys, and he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, because the trade deadline's coming up, and Nurkic hadn't missed any games, and now he is missing a game. And he was like, really, people think that? And I was like, yeah. And so later on he texted me, he's like, hey, can you send me a link to some of those rumors? And I was like, I don't even think they're actually rumors. It's just people that are kind of putting two and two together to say like, well, if a guy's missing a game, it's near the deadline. Yeah, maybe something's going on. But and so to your point, like people in the organization, we don't think like that, because it's like, we're just trying to get to the next game, it's day to day. And so the idea that like there's like this grand like plan that we're going to execute to misdirect or to kind of tip the hand, like, again, it's just, I wish we were that good at this job. And I don't know if any team is really, but I wish we were.
What you hit on right there is the tipping the hand. Whether or not people have agreed with moves in the past or under this current group, one thing that has been, along with injuries, the organization runs the tightest ship in the league. This team is never going to tip their hand on a trade. You will never get leaks. You will never get, oh, hey, we're going to rest this guy because he's getting moved. Like that's not how this front office on the basketball side has worked under Neil Olshey.
No, and I remember way back when Neil took the job initially, every once a year we get together at the beginning of the season. I think maybe Danny, you've even been in one or two of these meetings where you get together with the front office, and they, people who work for the team, they probably maybe lay things out a little bit different than maybe they would for outside media, but just kind of like a general off the record Q&A to where you can kind of get a sense of kind of where the front office's head is at and kind of what their expectations for the season are. So that way you can, maybe help along a little bit, tell some of the stories while also maybe not stepping in something that's gonna get you in trouble. And I remember one time in particular, it was the first time that kind of we sat down with Neil Olshey. He was like, look, I don't know exactly the way that things ran here before, but the notion that you have information that you can tell someone else, that's done. We do not do that. So the idea that like, if you know something, and you tell that to somebody else thinking that like maybe you'll get some information out of them and you can pass that along. He's like, no, I don't want that help. I'm not trying to hear it. That is not your place or your position. Do not do it. So, I mean, like it really has been an organizational thing, whereas before, like Kevin Pritchard was a guy who, stuff would get out there and, you could sometimes kind of assume where it came from. And Neil O'Shea, that is not the case. Like, I think
he is not Danny
knows that. No, I think everyone knows that Neil has a few guys that he deals with, and everything else is, and even those guys, he basically only gives them stuff when stuff is basically squared away, when it's done. So, I mean, that's just not the way they work. So at this time of year, whenever I see something come out, it's like, if it's from basically anyone but one or two guys, I know that if nothing else, it didn't come out of Portland. That doesn't mean it's not true, but I know that at that point, like, I need to consider who is benefiting from this idea, because I know that at least it didn't come from the Trailblazers.
To that point, I don't want to make you comment on any particular one in right now, but the one that comes to mind is a couple weeks ago, the Atlanta Hawks talking about the Blazers. Yeah. We're kicking around Jeremy Lin. And if you're listening to this is where you one of those things where if you're looking at rumors that involve Portland, you have to look at who's benefiting from this. The Blazers are the deepest at their guard position, right?
Yeah, they're deep at the position, as you well know, Danny. Like, the idea of taking back salary, even if it's expiring, is still like, are they really going to do that? Like, it makes no sense whatsoever. So, like, that for me is it's that one, and then I think someone had floated the Gasol idea too. It's like, yeah, but I don't get that. Like, what sense does that make? And so when as a fan, like, I know on one hand it's fun to read anyways, and it's sports, so it's like, so who cares? Like, it's the stakes are incredibly low. So if you want to kind of delve into that kind of speculation, then what's the big deal? Because it's not, no one's getting hurt for the most part. But when you work in the industry, it's like, do I really have to deal with this stuff? Like, do I really even have to answer this? Because you guys have to know that this is Bush League, right? And again, it's like, if it had come from someone else, maybe a guy who's a bit more who breaks Blazers news on a consistent basis. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna listen to that, and maybe I'm gonna kick a few things around and see if that's something I need to get ready for, or see if there's any way that I can maybe get in terms of some extra intel on that. But if it saved from that and saved from someone in the actual organization telling me something that's going to happen, I just, spending time on it seems kind of like a waste. There's other places to get that stuff, I guess.
You've been around for a couple of in-season trades. What is that like? Like, do you have any good trade chaos stories or anything?
It's not some. When I used to work in the office, and when I did more of what I do now, and also more of kind of the back-end website administration, those were always the difficult days, because particularly in our previous management on the business side, there was always this idea that it's like, we trade a guy, everything has to be wiped off the site that had that guy in it, which I always thought was weird, because it's like, people know he was on the team. Like, we don't have to like try to erase the memory of this or anything. Like, we just need to move forward knowing that this guy isn't playing for us anymore. But we haven't had a lot of like huge trades around the deadline, and even so, like, even the Plumlee trade for Jusuf Nurkic, which really kind of came out of nowhere. It's there's definitely a lot of stuff to do, but again, this is one of those situations where when you work for the team, while the journalistic side of you really wants to kind of get that stuff out there, you also need to take a step back, because if you put something out there before it's approved, or if you put it out there and the NBA sees it and it might at all endanger the decision or the move the team is making, like, that's a really bad place to be. So as a team employee, a lot of times in those trade situations, while everyone else on the outside is really furiously trying to get their story up, trying to get a quote, trying to get confirmation, those of us who work for the team, it's really more of a, let's pump the brakes a little bit here and wait till we get to the other side after it is officially announced, that we can really kind of start to really put in the work that we need to put in to get the views and to get the interest up for this transaction. So it's not as crazy as I think some people assume it is. I will say draft used to be pretty wild because, back in the Pritchard days when they were, whatever that draft was that they had like 4 or 5 trades, but like those are the ones where like it's really hard to keep track of even who's on the team anymore and who is going to be on the team. And trades are also another thing at the draft where the NBA has really started to tighten down on what you can and can't report. And if you put something out there before it's actually official, or is that going to come back? Or are you going to have to hear about that from the league? So, it behooves you to actually kind of take a breath and kind of survey the situation rather than kind of jump in with 2 feet, because you can get yourself in a bit of hot water from time to time. I will say too, my only good trade deadline story, and this is before I worked for the team, was back when I worked for OregonLive. We used to have a weekly, I guess it would have been a podcast. We didn't call it a podcast then because I don't know that the word even existed, but they were called the Quick Chat. So every week, Jason Quick we'd call in and people would send in questions from the forum, and we would do like a live streamed show, and Jason would answer the questions. And from time to time, we would have different guests on. And in 2007 must have been at the February 2007 deadline. I was doing a chat with Peter Vescey, Gaudy NBA Hall of Famer Peter Vescey, by the way. And I asked him, there was a rumor about Juan Dixon getting traded for Freddie Jones. And Freddie Jones, I believe, was with the Knicks at the time, Juan Dixon with the Blazers. And Pete Vescey, based out of New York, he's like, no, that's complete BS. It's not happening. That's a complete fabrication. 100%, that is not happening. 5 minutes later, Juan Dixon gets traded to the New York Knicks for Freddie Jones to Portland. So it was one of those things where it's like, even the guys who are well thought of and have connections and are Hall of Famers now, those guys get stuff wrong all the time too. So I've noticed throughout the years too, and I do this as well. We kind of ride guys from time to time when they get stuff wrong, and you keep reminding them of it. But if you do this job long enough, you're going to miss on a few things, and if you're like myself, you're going to miss on a lot of things. So, it's always worth keeping that perspective.
All right, with trades in mind, we have to kind of remind everybody what's on the line between you and I.
Oh yes, please do.
So, you believe, or let's do it this way. I believe that Portland is going to go status quo here, and they're going to make a move to get below the luxury tax line. And
you mean status quo for how they've behaved in the past?
Yes. Yeah. The luxury tax has existed for approximately 20 years, and the Blazers have paid it 3 times. And most of that was in the early 2000s. With the passing of Paul, the way everything kind of sits right now, I have a hard time believing that they will go away from that. You disagree?
I do disagree. I think if there was a move to make that would allow them to shed some salary while also not losing a key piece, I completely agree with you, Danny. I think they would do that because that's what they did last year. Like they basically traded Noah Vonleh for cap room. I mean, and I think Terry Stotts had even basically said as much the other day, or that's when we played the Knicks. So not the other day, but a little ways ago. Yeah. It was a cap move. Like it wasn't about not wanting Noah around, wasn't about not liking what he was doing. It was just, they got to a point where they felt like having him on the roster was not worth the salary cap hit they were going to take. So if there was a move like that out there, I think that they would do it. But I don't see that move. I think the guys that you would have to trade to get close to getting under the tax are guys that they are not going to trade for nothing. I mean, if you ask me, would they trade Al-Farouq Aminu? Sure. But I think they would want to get back a player that replaced Al-Farouq Aminu. They wouldn't want to be getting back a player who doesn't make nearly as much money as he does, unless, if he was a talented rookie, that'd be great. But the fact of the matter is, no one's trading those guys for a guy who's expiring. So really, to be perfectly honest, I think it's more likely they take on salary at this deadline than it is that they cut salary. I would say that neither happening is probably the most likely scenario. But again, like I was thinking about this when I was driving over after feeding my sister-in-law's cats this afternoon, that, I thought that it was probably more likely that they would take on some money if given the opportunity than they would to cut it.
Interesting.
And that is the bet. And if I win, then Danny has to devote his first tweet of the day to how spectacular I am for a week. Mm-hmm. And also has to make mention of it, I believe, on this here podcast.
Correct.
And if I lose, I will do the same. I will start for a week my Twitter activity with an ode to Danny and his intelligence and all the other great things about him, and also on the Rip City Report, a good devoted 2 to 3 minutes about whatever Danny would like it to be about. But I was assuming it would just be general praise and back patting. So there you go.
Congratulations is just fun.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to drag you into this, Tara, but I did do it.
And I gotta tell you, Danny,
making bets right and left.
I didn't tell Joe this either, by the way. So I might just have to spring it on him, which I do from time to time. Like every now and then, someone in the office would be like, "Hey, can you mention this on the Rip City Report?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, sure." And we'll be sitting down and be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, Joe, we need to do a couple reads about tickets and about the Blazer Pass on Comcast. So please go ahead and do that." So it won't surprise. So it might surprise him a little bit. Bottom line.
You love those Blazers Pass reads just as much as I do. Come on.
I absolutely, man. Blazers Pass. It's the best way to get your Trailblazer games if you're not able to be in front of a TV.
Okay, I get it. You guys are on TV and
whoa,
radio.
Let's slow down here, Tara. I am not on television.
Hey, Casey,
you're on television more than I am, Casey. I mean, neither of us are on TV more than Dan.
Only in the background, Tara. I have not been a guest on a television show. That happens like once a year because I can't get booked on the shows that Danny does for whatever reason.
Whoa. And Casey and I have talked about this. My show, Joe and Shane, is on game nights. Where is Casey at?
Okay.
I am at the arena. That's true. But all I'm saying is I've never received any
I'm sure
kind
somebody's got the technology there.
I was told one time it was because I wasn't an outsider. They're like, "No, you're not an outsider. This is Blazers Outsider." I was like,
that's not for me.
Conflicting stories. Very interesting.
It's not for me.
Well, this is not the show for everybody to talk about their different media accomplishments. This is the Blazers Edge podcast to talk about the Blazers. So I'm going to bring it back. Let's talk about some of the Blazers or the rumors that are circulating out there and some of the actual moves that have taken place in the NBA. So I don't know where you guys want to start. Dan, you want to just kind of...
Yeah, let's just start with the big one. How floored were you by the Zinger trade, Casey?
Quite floored. I was really surprised by that because
To be specific, you're talking about Kristaps Porzingis to Dallas Mavericks, correct?
Yes, exactly. To Dallas Mavericks for Dennis Smith Jr. and basically cap space. I was surprised by it because I was kind of under the impression. I mean, I know that there had been kind of some strife between Porzingis and the Knicks, but I kind of felt like, well, there's no way that you would cut bait on that kind of talent at this point in his career. Like that, there's no way you would do that
for pennies.
And exactly. And for a guy, Dennis Smith Jr., that the Knicks could have drafted last year if they wanted to. So, I mean, that one came out of left field for me, and it bummed me out too, because I mean, I've always felt like Kristaps Porzingis is a guy who, I think it would be a long shot, obviously, but the Blazers, I don't know if you guys remember, the Blazers were the first team to interview Kristaps when he came to Las Vegas for basically the one workout that he did in the United States, or his first workout. I remember he had like a crew following him, and Neil O'Shea and his staff were the first guys to interview with him, even though they had, I think in that draft, the Blazers were like 20 or something like that. So they were nowhere close to being near where Kristaps was going to go, but they still had interest. I know that Damian really likes Kristaps Porzingis as well. I thought he was a guy who perhaps at some point in time the Blazers might be able to make a play for. And now with Dallas, that obviously will not be the case. Now, granted, if he follows through on his threat to sign the qualifying offer, then, everything's back on the table at that point. You maybe try to get some space and see if, after he comes back from that knee injury, maybe you can make a play at some point in time. But I was very surprised by it because it's just, you don't figure that generational talent gets traded all that often. And again, maybe the medical on Porzingis is that knee is not healing the way they would like, but assuming that he comes back all right from that ACL, which, I know he's one of the bigger guys to have that ACL injury, but, the medical science has gotten to the point where an ACL tear is not that bad. Exactly. Guys come back from that. It's not like anything close to a career ender. So, the outside of that, like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me unless you buy the narrative that the Knicks already feel very confident and or know for sure that they're going to be able to sign one or both of Kyrie Irving and or Kevin Durant. And again, like I can't buy that. Like maybe they got a shot at those guys. I think that's feasible. But the idea that like they know at this point that those guys are going to sign with them, as someone has pointed out, two of the kind of most fickle stars in the NBA, like I can't buy that line of reasoning. I wish people would apply that kind of reasoning to the mistakes I make in my life. You know, like when I screw something up, I want someone to be like, oh, well, there's no way he would do something like that unless he already had a plan to take advantage of it. Like that's the way I want people to view when I screw up. And I'm not saying Nick screwed up, but it's just the notion that like, well, there must be something else. There must be a reason why. Well, sometimes people just do stupid things because they do stupid things. Like that happens. So I will be very interested how that shakes out. And yes, I was quite surprised. And for the Mavs to get him as well too. Just like we need more. Like we need more talent in the Western Conference. Like it has to be harder at this point. I've been a steadfast. I believe in conferences. I do not think that they should go 1 through 16. But man, that trade yesterday had me rethinking it a little bit because I was like, man, if there's all the talent in the NBA is basically outside of Giannis is in the Western Conference at this point. So like, I don't know. Maybe they do need to do something because if you're going to win 45 games in the West and end up in 10th or 11th place, and some team that you boat raced the 2 times you played them in the East is in the playoffs, at a certain point, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
In my thinking with the New York Knicks, I just don't. Can you guys remember a time that a team has so enthusiastically dove into the tank? I mean, really? And why this year? This is not the year to do that.
Well, free agents.
I mean, of course you have Zion, but like the odds are different this year. So it just seems crazy to me that they've given up on all, anything that was holding them together. And they're just going to go all in on tanking.
You've got the ability to land the number 1 pick in Zion, who's a generational guy, but you've also had, what Casey is touching on here, I mean, you've got KD, you've got Kyrie. While I don't believe anything's done, if you also don't believe that LeBron wasn't basically signed to Los Angeles before last summer, you're not reading the tea leaves. I would say I don't think it's done, but I think the reason New York was so committed to this is that they have a pretty good inkling that one of those guys is coming to New York, and the hope is that with that they can draw one of the others. Does that sound too far off for you, Casey?
No, it doesn't. But for me, it's like then that one better be Kevin Durant because Kyrie Irving, while he is a phenomenal player, I think he's shown both in Cleveland and now I don't know if you can make it definitive, but there are some inklings that he is not necessarily the guy that you can put at the head of your organization and say that Kyrie Irving is our leader. Now everyone follow him because it's not. That just doesn't really seem to be his MO. So, if you're going to go all in like that, it better be for Durant because I don't know that it's necessarily worth it just for a guy like Kyrie. Because again, like if you're going to Kyrie and you had Porzingis still, then sure. Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad little 1-2 punch. That might get you somewhere in the East. But if it's Kyrie and Kevin Knox and, you're holding out hope that you get Zion, which, by the way, like just being the worst team in the NBA does not mean you're going to get that first pick. I see Knicks fans talking about Zion like it's like a foregone conclusion or something. And it's like, guys, like you realize that more often than not, the team with the best odds does not actually get the number 1 pick. So, I mean, it's either they know that they have those guys locked down or it's an incredible gamble. And, I think that I don't know, like to go that hard on spec that'd be hanging them out there.
It's just wonderfully who the Knicks are, and I can't wait until Kevin Durant ends up there because that'll be one good guy out of the West. We'll send him to the East, and he can just do his thing in New York, and that'll be fine. But what I want to know about really though is Anthony Davis and what you guys think is going to happen with him.
My assumption is that I've said this before. I said on the podcast today, like I have no idea whatsoever why the Pelicans would trade Anthony Davis right now. Like I don't know a single benefit to trading Anthony Davis before the deadline on Thursday. Like what could you possibly get now that you couldn't get in the off season or even into the season next year before the deadline? Like this idea that there's like a clicking or ticking clock is like, that's all from the Lakers perspective. That is a complete media fabrication. Like there's no reason whatsoever for the Pelicans to rush on this. So my assumption is that he probably gets dealt in the off season. I can't think of a single reason for not waiting for a little bit. Joe had mentioned, he's like, well, you know, you haven't had the specter hanging over the team. It's like, well, yeah, but that's already going to happen anyways. That's already happening now. Anthony Davis doesn't really seem to me like the kind of guy who's going to walk in that locker room and just start, you know, MFing guys. So, I mean, like I don't know. I think it'll happen eventually, but I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. And if I was the Pelicans, I would imagine I could get a whole lot of a better deal than what the Lakers are sending me. Now, granted, you know, him claiming that he's only going to consider one or two teams might make some teams skeptical to take that risk. But as we saw with Paul George, everyone was sure that he was going to go to Los Angeles. And I think that the way that turned out has probably given some other teams some confidence that, hey, we should take a chance on this because, again, this guy he's not even a generational talent. He's even better than that. Like, if we have any chance whatsoever, we should go for it. So I'm not expecting anything to happen on this deadline. And I think, you know, by the time after the draft, when everyone knows who's picking which, I think it might happen then, but I wouldn't expect anything before that.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Casey. There's no reason to do anything rash right now unless you're the Lakers. And we've seen that from Rich Paul, now Anthony Davis's agent. LeBron's obviously best friend and his agent, runs Clutch Sports, putting it out there. I mean, as we're recording this, there's more and more coming out via Twitter, via Anthony Davis's dad, Anthony Davis Sr., how his son shouldn't sign in Boston and won't sign in Boston because how they treated Isaiah Thomas. I mean,
come on.
Oh, it's a full
Good
court.
grief.
It's a full court press, baby. Yeah, it is a full court press right now when they are trying. The Lakers are desperate. Here's the thing for everybody wondering why this matters so much for the Lakers. It's not just the other offers. They can't wait through this year and then another year. LeBron will be 36 years old by the time AD's deal ends. So if they wait around, listen, I'm one of the biggest LeBron fans there is. He's a physical marvel. What just happened to him for the first time in his career? He's missed significant time due to injury. His body is getting to that point where it doesn't matter how Herculean he is. He's eventually going to break down. And the Lakers cannot afford to wait. So if you're the Pelicans, the media may be saying you don't have any leverage, but right now you're basically waiting till the Lakers give everything. And there's no
even their everything, is it really anything?
It's not that good.
It's not much.
Like, hey, listen, I'm Team Lonzo is trash. Like that's been me from day one, folks. Like you're preaching to the choir. But if you get the Lakers' best offer, that's the offer that you use against another team. What's your best offer?
Sure. Yeah. I think that at some point in time too, like I think that whatever the Lakers reported offer would probably be good enough to where you wouldn't just say we're not doing anything. But the notion that like, well, you got to do something. It's like, well, not if you're taking back salary that you don't really want in the first place, you know, like in some respects, you can be better off just letting a guy walk. I don't necessarily think that's this situation, but just the notion of like, well, you got to get something for the guy he's leaving. It's like, well, sometimes you just take the cost savings and appreciate the time you had with that player and call it a day. So, but yeah, I mean, if I was another team, I would take all this stuff they're saying that he's only going to resign with the Lakers. And if I felt like I had a good package and I had a good team around him, I would say, you know what, I'm going to call that bluff. We're going to take a chance. We're going to trade for you. And we're going to try to convince you to stay, as, you know, the Raptors are doing with Kawhi right now. And I think too,
18 months is an eternity. You can do so much in 18 months. I think people should be scrambling to get him. And the idea that the Pelicans aren't, you guys are so boring. The Pelicans aren't going to do anything. I'm so disappointed. I wanted your guys' like thoughts on what they're going to happen. If the Pelicans do nothing, are they going to not play Anthony Davis? And if they don't let Anthony Davis play because they're worried about him getting injured, like they already have a hard time getting anybody to come play with them. Is anybody ever going to come play with them ever again if they watch them sit Anthony Davis and have him sit there and do nothing for half of a year? I mean, something's going to happen.
If the money is right, yes, they will. Which is why the whole idea, like, oh, you treated Isaiah Thomas badly in Boston, so we don't want to go there. Like, I don't buy that for 1 second. When
There's
when
a
the money
difference between
when the money
Isaiah
is
Thomas
right.
and Anthony Davis, though.
No, absolutely. But I guess what I'm saying is that this idea that like players are watching closely to see how other players are being treated in these situations and then making decisions based off of that. I just don't think that really happens.
It plays in the back of their mind, but it's not. These aren't deciding factors. If you're looking at something, you're looking more like generational issues within an organization. Knicks.
Well, and Tara, to your point, like if I was the Pelicans right now, I would be pounding the pavement to move everybody else. I would be trying to get my team ready for what's next outside of Anthony Davis. So I would, and I think, we've kind of heard this already, that supposedly guys like Nurkic, guys like the fellow whose name I'm escaping, who was a Laker last year, Randall. I mean, like, those are supposedly, those guys are being put out there. And again, if I was the Pelicans, that's what I would do right now. I wouldn't necessarily be like, let's trade Anthony Davis. I would say, let's start moving these guys that we might be able to get draft assets or young talent for. And then when the opportunity comes to maybe make a move for something bigger with AD, we'll make it at that time. And at that point in time, we will be ready to start our rebuild. We can compile assets and hopefully get moving in the right direction when the best deal comes along for Davis. That if I was the Pelicans, that's how I would be approaching the situation right now. I wouldn't worry about trading Anthony Davis until, again, at least this offseason, because you're not going to get the best offers.
So you just sit him with an injury the whole year?
I probably would. Yeah. I mean, because, at a certain point, it's like,
too.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense to me. Like, yeah, if you're probably not going anywhere, which at this point, I think the Pelicans, if they're being honest with themselves, I think they probably know that, even if, AD hadn't had a trade request, that their chances of making the playoffs this season we're getting slimmer and slimmer by the day. So I think when that's out there and a likelihood, I think it probably makes some sense to prepare for what's next in their terms, the draft. So, I mean, what would be better for the Pelicans right now to kind of fall further and further down the standings and maybe get a nice little draft pick to add into what they're maybe hoping to do in the future, or to, have Anthony Davis play and win enough to maybe be in the conversation for the 8th seed. I mean, with a guy who has already said he doesn't want to be with their organization anymore. So I would sit him because, yeah, you don't want him to get injured. And he put in the request, like if he had kept it quiet, you keep playing if that's what he wants. And then when the deal comes up, you execute it. But since they've already put the business out on the street, it's like, well, then we don't have really any choice but to sit you because we can't risk you getting injured.
I've held off on specifics for one because I wanted to hit you on one, Casey, because it's not way out there, but I think it hits home for a lot of Blazers fans. We talked about the Porzingis trade. One of the guys that was moved in that deal was Wes Matthews. He's going to be bought out.
Do I think?
Dramatic pause.
Yeah, I was going to say pregnant pause.
No, I don't want to answer. Well, do you think the Blazers would go after him? You've been around Wes. You were here obviously when he was here. Does he fit what this team needs, and is he a guy that I think that can add enough to this team to see them push past that first round?
I don't think that Wes would be the difference between like getting out of the first round and not, but I do think he would help. I mean, you have a guy who, is not the defender he once was, but is still a stout perimeter guy, a guy who's a nice 3-and-D option, who gives you a bit of not a great handle, not a great finisher, but a guy who, can put some pressure on a defense. And yeah, I mean, as a guy coming off the bench, absolutely. But the things that make Wes Matthews such a great player are also the things that make Wes Matthews maybe kind of someone you have to consider when you're adding him to his team, and that he wants to play. Like the idea that Wes at this point in his career is going to be satisfied being a bench guy, I don't know so much. The Wes Matthews I know is not a guy who would be content with that necessarily. So, and I'm not saying that hasn't changed, or maybe, for a season after being bought out, that maybe he would accept something like that. But like the idea that Wes is ready to begin the kind of coasting off into the sunset of his career portion of his career, like I don't think he's there yet. Like Wes is one of those guys, he's going to play till his legs fall off, and he's going to be in practice every single day trying to go at your guys and be like, hey, I should be the one starting, not you. So, he's a guy who I have a great deal of respect for, who I like a lot, both professionally and personally. But I just don't know exactly how that fit would be. And I think there was maybe some disagreements, or at least some hurt feelings maybe with how things ended with Wes here in Portland. So, and Wes is a guy who has a long memory. Another one of the things that makes him a great player is that, he's a guy who holds on to things and uses them later on for motivation. So, I don't know if that would be something he would want to do. I think from the opposite perspective, I think that, they like what they have right now in CJ, and particularly with their reserve guards and Seth Curry and to a lesser extent, he's not really a guard, but Jake Layman picked up some of those minutes, and with Evan Turner. So I don't know if they would cut a guy to bring in a guy like Wes Matthews. I think that he could help any team, but I don't know that he would necessarily help you so much to where it's worth the expense and just maybe some of the minor issues that might come along with cutting one guy and then bringing another veteran guy into your locker room at this point in the season.
Yeah, Dan, how did you think how would that work out in the rotation? Like, who would leave? Who would lose the minutes that he would get?
Listen, it was just a little pie in the sky, all right? Even
moves, man.
No, it's not a bad idea.
Listen, of all the guys in the past generations, everybody knows Brandon Roy's number one for me, but Wes is very high up there for me. An undrafted dude who spent a year basically rebuilding his game in Utah, makes good, and becomes a cult hero here. Like, of course I'd like to see him come back. But, I mean, it's one of those things where this is not a secret. I talk about wing depth on this team all the time. That where does the non-siloed player come from? Where does the 3 and the D come from? Where does the transition buckets come from? And I know Wes doesn't address those all that well, but it's just more, like I said, a little more pie in the sky. And it opens up the idea of, do you think the Blazers would, if presented with the right opportunity, go after a player in the buyout market?
Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, I think if it was someone that was more of like a 2-3, then yeah, absolutely. But and again, with Wes, I'm guessing Wes is probably going to have some options as well. So while I don't know if it'll necessarily be a bidding war, I'm guessing that he's going to probably have a pick of maybe a couple places. And I don't know how high Portland would be on his list. So,
okay. Speaking of buyouts, Melo's being bought out. Your team anti-Melo, right?
Yeah. I don't really see it. I've watched Carmelo Anthony in his last 2 stops, whereas people who keep making an argument for him, I don't know that they have. So, I mean, I said on the radio the other day that I thought that perhaps that he was just done, period. And, that might have been a little overboard, but
Shanghai is calling.
Yeah. I mean, and again, like, if you're Carmelo, like, I don't understand it from his perspective either. Like, you're square on money. Like, you're set, or at least you would assume he's set. You're probably, unless you're going to sign with the Warriors, you're not winning a championship this year. You're not going to be the difference between the Lakers winning a championship and not winning a championship. So what's the motivation? And he seems like a guy too he wants to have a role that's specific to what he wants. So it's like, at a certain point, why not just hang him up, man? Like, you're already to the point where you don't kind of want to change. You don't want to be a guy who kind of transitions at the end of his career. You want to be the star player still, which is fine. Like, that's cool. But, just maybe accept that fact that you're not the player you used to be and kind of continue on with the rest of your life. But I think that's something we saw from Melo even the last couple of years. I remember whatever it was when ESPN puts out those top 100 players or whatever, and Carmelo was at like 30 or something like that. And, it was like, how can Carmelo be that low? And it's like, even then he was like, this is disrespectful. Like, I'm better than these guys. It's like, look, man, maybe you're just not, like at a certain point, you got to kind of survey the situation and say, well, if no one really wants me, and if I flamed out at the last 2 places I've been, and 3 really, if you want to count the Knicks, then, I mean, what's that saying? When someone tells you who they are, believe them. Like, I kind of think that's maybe where we're at with Carmelo, is that, he is a guy who is from a different era of NBA offensive basketball, and it's just not it's not necessarily all that applicable to what we're doing today, particularly for a guy who's on in years.
I constantly forget that he exists, just because this league is so fast paced. There's so much going on. And if you're not like in the headlines, you drop out so fast because there's always people lined up to take your place in the news. And I'm always just like, oh yeah, I forgot Carmelo Anthony was even still in the league.
I would like to forget, but it seems like there's a few guys in the media whose job it is to get Carmelo another job. Like, I don't know I look at power rankings on ESPN every single week because I do a little aggregation for it. Mark Spears, for like 5 weeks straight, his little blurb about the Blazers in his power rankings was, Blazers could sure use another scorer like Carmelo Anthony to help him out off the bench. And it's like, Doug, at a certain point, like, what are you getting a cut here? Like Dennis Scott the other day being like, on, I think the Players Only broadcast from the Thunder game was like, yeah, I think the Players would be a great spot for him. It's like, what? Why? Like, explain to me, and don't say bench scoring, because one, the guy said he doesn't want to come off the bench anyways, and two, he's not really an efficient scorer. So like, unless you're getting a taste of whatever Carmelo Anthony's vet minimum contract is, like, or unless he really did you a solid at some point in time in your career, I don't know why you're pounding the pavement to try to get this guy work.
Well, now that you guys are both all wound up about Carmelo Anthony, which is not where I thought this podcast was going to go, we should probably start wrapping it up because we've gone on a little bit longer than we promised Casey that we would go. So, Casey, you want to tell people where they can find you, and go ahead and tell them where they can find you.
Plug all your works for.
Sure. Well, obviously, read the stuff at trailblazers.com/center.net. A lot of my content ends up on both those URLs. I'm on Twitter, obviously, at @chold, though I would not recommend that you follow me. As I always say, I'm one of the, I won't say I'm one of the only, but I do not ever ask people to follow me on Twitter because I don't think I'm all that good at it anyways. So like, long story short, don't follow me on Twitter is what I'm trying to say. I'm also on Instagram, which you should follow me on because I feel like I do a better job there. And if you like photos of sneakers and players on the road and hummingbirds and my dog from time to time, that's the place to find them, which is Casey Holdahl on Instagram. And one thing I do actually want to plug is on Wednesday, February 6th at Tough Luck on Deacom here in Portland. We're going to be doing a live recording of the Rip City Report once again. Joe, myself, will be answering questions, doing a live recording of the podcast, drink specials, Rip City Red Hot Chicken Sandwich special. We'll have some prizes. DJ Lickety Brindle will be making his debut there as well. So check us out Wednesday, February 6th at Tough Luck, 6:00.
Awesome. I really love your Instagram pictures. Thank you for sharing all those.
Oh, thank you so much.
I mean, Bruce is a legend and his photos, like game photos and everything are amazing. You have a little bit more of the people stuff, just like, oh, we're randomly sitting here in this chair. Let me take a picture of all you guys in this chair. And it's a great balance between the two of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, Bruce is the god. Bruce is a pro through and through. I'm a guy that takes photos from time to time. So there's definitely a difference.
Yeah, the former Blazers Edge members photographer rankings between you and Golliver is pretty close.
Yeah, I'm going to give myself the head over Ben. Ben did Ben's early sneaker work was phenomenal, and I think really set the groundwork for what a lot of people are doing in the NBA now in terms of sneaker coverage. But I'd give myself the leg up in that one. Now, in terms of writing, Ben is like leaps and bounds above the absolute best that I've ever done. So Ben can sleep tight knowing that while I might be a little bit of a better photographer, he is a far superior writer.
Danny, how about your stuff?
As always, you can find me on Blazers Outsiders every pre and post game show on NBC Sports Northwest with Joe Simon, Shane Brent, and myself. It would be remiss if I did not plug Blazers Edge Night. Obviously, we're getting closer and closer and closer to that. So if you can get there, we're trying to send 2,000 kids to see the Blazers take on the Brooklyn Nets in March. Tickets start at $10. This is like the big push, really like the month leading up to it. And if you haven't heard me talk about it, or Tara talk about it, or Dave talk about it, anybody talk about it, one of the coolest events I've ever been a part of. It could literally be life-changing. Like these are the kind of stories that you tell, you know, as a kid growing up, you know, that one time I got to go to a game and it, you know, meant everything to me. And these are kids that don't only get the opportunity. So if you have the opportunity to donate, go to Blazers Edge. There'll be a link on the front page. There'll be a link at the bottom of every article. You can go to the Blazers ticket site or Ticketmaster. Use the code Blazers Edge. That will also link you to it. $10. If you can donate, please donate. Other than that, you can find me on social media, Twitter, IG, everything else, at dmarang, at DMARANG. My Twitter is not good, but I like to think it is. I'm different from Casey. I want you to follow me because I'm vain.
You can find me on Twitter at TCBBIGGS. I love Twitter, and I think that I'm funny, and people are just missing out on some really good jokes, but they could also be like super bad jokes, which is why nobody likes them. I don't know. I entertain myself endlessly on it. I'm also on Instagram, but I am very boring on Instagram. You can also follow the Hoops and Talks podcast. We just had an episode come out with Alexis Robinson, who you mentioned, Damarang. She is the publicist she does PR with Zach Collins, and we had her on to tell us about Zach, you know, in high school and college and what it's been like working with him. It was a really great interview. So you can find that on the Hoops and Talks podcast. You can follow Hoops and Talks on Twitter at Hoops and Talks. And I think that ought about do it for us. Guys, Casey, thank you so much for joining us. That was awesome. And thanks to all of our listeners for sticking with us. This is kind of a long one.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tara. I really appreciate it. And I just want to mention real quick, too, I appreciate what you're doing in terms of trying to expand the options for the ladies out there, because I've always felt like we have such phenomenal women fans. I mean, everyone's just fans, but like they're so great. And one of kind of my biggest, I don't know if I'd say regrets, but just I wish I was better at communicating to our entire fan base. So the fact that you're out there and making that more accessible to all the women out there who are such wonderful fans, who might feel like all these jerk dudes out there are kind of keeping them from being able to enjoy the things they want to. I really appreciate you out there doing that. I've wanted to mention that for a while. So thank you so much for playing that role. It's incredibly important.
Oh, thank you very much, Casey. I appreciate that. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.